Hello and welcome to Tuttle Data. Today I'm going to be covering a few pivot table basics that I use all the time to get the most out of my data. So to start, we're going to clean our data set. So before we ever touch a pivot table, this will save us a lot of time in the back end so it doesn't give us a headache later when we have to change the formatting. So a lot of times I will receive data that has date fields that are in like a time format or just a general number format. So to change those, let's do that where we shift right and then control shift down to select all of our date fields. And we're going to do the drop down in the home tab. And from here, we'll select short date. Short date is what I like. If you have other fields that have or need a different format, you can choose from here, or there is a number format drop down for the formatting other types of cells. And there's a lot of different options there. Everything else in our data set looks pretty good. We have first name, last name, we have address, city, state, zip, as well as region and some product information as well. So if everything looks good, let's go ahead and create our pivot table. So let's go to insert and you can choose recommended pivot tables. And I don't like to do that. I like to start fresh and just know where I'm going to take my pivot table. And it's also good not to just dive right in if you're not as familiar. So let's go to pivot table here and it'll automatically select the data range that we need. So let's go to new worksheet and click OK. And here is the basis of our pivot table. And on the right side, we'll have our pivot table fields. So for our customer information, we have our region and product information there. And then below that, we have our filters, columns, rows, and values areas. So if I were to put in like products into filters, that would show up on the upper left of the pivot table and you can make your selection from there. And so if you wanted to select multiple items, let's say shirts and shoes, it would only show the data for those two products. As for columns, let's throw a create date on there, and it gives us all the dates that we have in our data set in a wide format just on that first row. If we move it to rows, it'll give us the same data, the same dates, all just within one column. And as for values, if we wanted to look at like product value, it'll give you by default the sum of the product values within your data set. If we were to add something like customer ID, it would default to the count of. And sometimes if your customer ID is summed where you want to count, so to say, I want to see how many are in this category, you want to use the count instead. So to change it, you can left click the value, go to value field settings. And within the scroll box here, we have the option to select sum, count, average. And if you want, there's min and max and a bunch of other options as well. But we're going to focus on the count. So from here, we can start playing around with our date fields and get a broader idea of how our data is doing over time. So if we wanted to see the number of accounts we've created over time, let's throw account create date into rows, which breaks out all the dates that we have. You can see how many accounts were created on that specific date. Now, that doesn't really tell us a whole lot. It doesn't show us much of a trend. It doesn't show us, what it's like on a month over month or year over year basis. So let's change it to be a consolidated, nice, clean year and month. So select one of the days, go to the Analyze tab, and then Group Selection. And that'll bring up the grouping window, and we can select months and then years as well. So what that does is group based off of year, and we can see on the right side, years is first. If we were to switch years and date, it would be, January and then all the years that have January. But we want to look at it for years first and just see over time how our performance is. One of the nice things about groupings is that you can expand and collapse the different fields that we have in there. So for years, if you click the minus sign, it'll collapse all the months that are within that year to just show the year total. You can press it again to expand, or if you have multiple years or multiple groups, you can right click go to expand collapse, and you can either expand collapse the 1 year or expand collapse the entire field. So for here, we're looking at just a year-over-year view of all the totals that we have. Another nice piece of groupings is we can separate the dates that we have. So for years and the date itself, we can put that over into columns, and that'll break it out to be a year-over-year and a month-over-month view of how our customer created data looks. And if we want to see it in a pivot chart, which is a handy tool for having a little bit more flexible data, let's put that back in the rows. And then under the Analyze tab, we can select Pivot Chart. Because we're working with time series data, let's select Line Chart and click OK. So here we can see a year-over-year line chart of our customers that were created. If we want to see it on a month-over-month basis, let's right-click one of the years in the pivot table, expand collapse, and let's expand the entire field. So using pivot tables and pivot charts is a good way to see like an overall, like how your data is doing, how we're trending, and just get a broader idea of what's going on. So using dates and using groups is a perfect way to kind of do that. From here, we can see that April was down in 2022. So if we were going to use pivot tables to kind of investigate, that's what I'm going to show you now. So creating another pivot table off of our data set, like I have here, we're going to use the purchase date now. So different from the account create date, let's throw purchase date on. Do the same thing with the grouping. So go to the Analyze tab, group the selection, select years and months. And we just want 2022. So let's throw years 2 onto filters. Select just 2022. Click OK. And then now, since we're looking at just purchase data, we can still use customer ID to get the count. And here we have all the months of purchases. So we can see still that even though it was trending up, we had April and May that were down, and then it jumps back up in June and July. So why is that? Let's dig into it a little more. So if we were going to use purchase date here, let's throw that into columns so we still get a month-over-month view. And let's throw something like region, see if region is impacting that. Now from here, we can't really tell what's happening with all the numbers that we have. So one of the tricks that I use all the time is getting the percentage month-over-month of the data within our table. So if we go to the values in the bottom right, let's left click and go back into the value field settings. And on the second tab for show values as, we're going to use the drop down to get to the percent difference from. And just a reminder, we're working with purchase date, so let's use that and go to previous. So what that does is gives us against the previous month, where do the numbers change? Let's clean it up a little bit to make it a little more readable. So we can see the Middle Atlantic, South, Southwest, and West all declined in April, but it doesn't really tell us like why. So maybe we should throw, instead of region, let's put product on there. And right away we can see that in April and May, shoes just declined drastically. Now, if we know the business, it could be that we discontinued that product line, and so it's tapering out the purchases of that product. And so that would be the cause of the declines we see in April and May. So this is a perfect example of how using pivot tables to organize and make your data more flexible can really help identify issues within your data or within your business. And I'll make more videos on pivot table basics and more advanced issues as well. So if you like this video, please subscribe or follow for more data tips. And thanks for watching.